You're listening to Dateline Latin America, Tear Gas and Tango with
Joe Goldman, 37 years with ABC News, then with UPI, with The Village Voice, and many other.
And me, Daniel Schweimler, originally from London, formerly of the BBC, 19 years, and more recently with Al Jazeera English across Latin America.
They'll be sitting at a kitchen table in Buenos Aires talking about their journalistic adventures across the region, covering earthquakes, flooding and fires, talking to presidents, charlatans, sports stars and other newsmakers. In short, journalism and the state of the world.
Well, hey Joe, we're back.
Hey, it's been a long time.
It has. Yeah, I had
you were in London, right?
A few rain-soaked days in London, yeah. Now we're back into the glorious sunshine of Buenos Aires. What, 32, 33 degrees we've been at the last few days.
Been lovely, yes.
We're not complaining. The Argentines do. Que calor, the heat. But yeah. Also not complaining, it seems, is the former president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez. He's thanking God, he's thanking Donald Trump for letting him go. He was in prison in the US. 45 years, I think was he sentenced to?
That's right, yes.
For crimes, well, a whole host of crimes, including drug dealing, money laundering, arms dealing, all sorts of things.
And they had him, as they say, dead to rights.
Yeah.
And he was convicted in a U.S. court, and given that sentence, I think he also had to pay a huge fine that he, with the clemency given, he does not have to pay, I don't believe.
Right, and so he did 1 year of that 45 years, and then President Trump comes along and says he's a good guy, he shouldn't be in prison. So he's undermining his own judicial system, the US judicial system, by saying, off you go. And Orlando Hernandez comes out thanking God, thanking President Trump, who he says is a wonderful man, and he's heading back, I guess, to Honduras, where we're in the middle of an election still. They voted on at the end of November. Here we are, the middle of December, and we still don't have a result.
Yeah. It's interesting because certainly Hernandez is somebody who we could say is the worst of all the, well, I don't know if he's the worst of all the Trump pardons, because Trump did pardon more than 1,500 people who were involved in the taking of the Capitol on January 6th. We can say that a lot of the people who Trump has pardoned, and he's made, I believe it's something like 2,300 pardons. And a lot of those people are people who are involved in money fraud schemes. People who were either doing crazy stock schemes or ripping people off in different various ways. And Trump has now put these people back out into the community where they can very, very easily do the same thing again.
As Orlando Hernandez probably will as well. I mean, he's a convicted drug dealer at a time when the United States has launched its war against the drug cartels by bombing these ships, these boats in the Caribbean and in the Pacific, blaming Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, accusing him of being a drug dealer himself, member of a cartel. Yet he's let this convicted criminal out. I mean, a man who won initial elections, he was in office for 8 years in Honduras. The 2013 elections, he completely bought them. He stole about $300 million from the Honduran health service, which subsequently went, to pay for his campaign. The health service subsequently goes bankrupt. So that is thousands, tens of thousands of Hondurans living in poverty who leave the country. Where do they go? They go to the United States if they can.
That's right.
Cross the border. These unwanted migrants who Trump accuses of flooding, their borders. So it's a situation that indirectly or quite directly Donald Trump has created.
Well, also don't forget that Trump and Elon Musk have completely cut U.S. aid, the AID, Assistance and Development Organization, that was very important in countries like Honduras. So Honduras is being stretched, and certainly people will be trying to stream across borders to either Mexico or the U.S., and people are being squeezed out of their lives. And the other thing about that 300 million theft of the health system is that even though he's been pardoned in the U.S., Hernandez could face charges in Honduras over that robbery.
Although unlikely if the Conservative National Party wins those elections, Donald Trump again has stuck his oar in the way he did with the Argentine midterm elections, to telling the people of another country who they should vote for. He's saying they should vote for the National Party, which Orlando Hernandez was the president for, and not to vote for the other guys. Last we looked, there were a few thousand votes between the candidate Nasri Asfura and their main challenger Salvador Nasrallah. Few thousand votes between them, still counting. Weeks later, nobody's declared, but it looks as though the only vote Trump will accept, and he seems to have a say in this, is a victory for Asfura of the National Party, in which case Orlando Hernandez goes home, doesn't get prosecuted, and no doubt carries on with his criminal activities.
And what Trump has said, similarly to Argentina, is if the other candidate wins, not his chosen candidate, they will receive no help, no aid from the U.S., which is interesting because U.S. aid has basically dried up for countries like Honduras.
So he's one who got away with it. I mean, they do, don't they? The nastier they are, the more likelihood it seems they'll get away with it. I'm thinking of the former president of Paraguay, Mr. Stroessner, Alfredo Stroessner, who served as the president for decades. Nasty piece of work, tortured his opponents, ruled with a fist of iron until it became untenable. Then he simply left the country and lived in very comfortable exile in Brazil for about 17 or so years until he died a peaceful death in his own bed, as far as I'm aware. So got away with it, never prosecuted. So that was one. There's a string of them. I'm thinking also of Augusto Pinochet, former dictator of Chile. Again, killed hundreds, thousands of his own people after taking office in a military coup in 1973.
And you followed that case when it was in Spain and England.
I did.
You?
He's come to London, to the London clinic for medical treatment. This was after he had left the presidency. At a time, it was unheard of that a foreign judge, in this case a Spanish judge, Baltasar Garzón, should issue an arrest warrant for Augusto Pinochet while he was receiving treatment in London to be tried by a criminal court. Nobody really knew. There was kind of confusion all around when this happened. So it was the right thing to do. I mean, bring him back to rights, hold him accountable for the crimes he had committed on the international stage. There were so many accusations against him. There were survivors of his abuse living in Spain, living in the UK, living in Argentina, all over, behind the case. Yet the British authorities, especially Margaret Thatcher, the former Prime Minister, basically put him up in a comfortable house on the outskirts of London while the proceedings went ahead to try to extradite him, to bring him to Spain to be tried. And that simply never happened. It was well over a year where he was living in comfort, being visited by Margaret Thatcher, among others, at his home in Virginia Water. And I was there in Madrid at the time, interviewing victims, former Chileans, victims who lived in Madrid at the time. They were holding hunger strikes, protests constantly to get him extradited. A whole bunch of Spanish lawyers working on the case. The world was watching. The right thing could have been done. And at the end of the day, I suspect Britain, Spain, Chile did a deal to say, he's too sick to be tried. And
remember that? Yeah, I covered his return to Chile, and he was supposedly on his last legs, and he was having trouble. He was not ambulatory and blah, blah, blah. He comes into the Chilean military base, flies in, coming out with crutches. He gets off the plane, comes down, throws the crutches away, and just walks away, saying like, fuck you to everybody who was, poor Pinochet, let's let him go back, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, no, it was an opportunity for the world to do the right thing, and they blew it. And I blame the Spanish government, the then British Foreign Secretary Jack Straw, and the Chilean authorities. And he went on to live and this was in the late 90s, 2000, and he died in the end in 2000 and end of 2006.
He actually was still a senator.
Yeah.
He was senator for life,
Right.
which was one of the things he put into practice before when he was voted out.
Right. So he's another one who simply got away with it. I mean, an interesting case, Argentina. I mean, we had our military government here from 76 until 83. Again, horrendous human rights abuses committed, 30,000 people kidnapped, tortured, killed. And the prosecutions of those military leaders started in 83 after they left office, were forced to leave office, but then they were given pardons a couple of years later
by Mr. Menem.
Yeah. So why it's never really explained. Threats from the still serving military. Life must move on. We've got to brush it under the carpet and look to the future. Who knows? And they lived a good 20 years or so of enjoying the impunity. Carried on working, walking the streets. You never knew. I remember just kind of being on the underground, on the train, seeing a military-looking person in front of me, elderly probably, and thinking, were you one of them? Were you one of the torturers? You had no way of knowing. You were living amongst them. Was your taxi driver a former torturer? Was your lawyer? We didn't know for a while.
I remember Miriam Lewin, who was a victim in the ESMA torture center, talking during that period of time that she was a journalist at that time with Channel 13 and in Buenos Aires, and she went to have a coffee in a coffee shop across from Congress, and she said she's drinking her coffee and she sees a neck of a person not facing her at the next table, and she says, my God, that's Tigre Acosta, who had tortured her.
No.
She ran out crying. Those were the things that were happening at that point in time. I remember doing a piece on the torturers, and I ended up talking to a number of them, trying to get them to do this documentary we were doing for a Swedish human rights organization. And, I called a number of them. They were working in the ports, they were working in the airports, in security. American Airlines security guy was Donda Tigel,
right.
one of the leaders of the ESMA school.
Right.
That was the head of security for ESMA. So they were not only living wonderful lives, but getting huge salaries, utilizing their criminal activity to do in posts like security and training people.
Well, no one knows security better than they do, I guess.
Yeah.
Although they didn't get off completely scot-free. There's a very particular Argentinian form of protest, and a word that goes with it, an escrache, to escrachear, which, as far as I know, doesn't exist anywhere else. But it basically means that if you know somebody to be guilty, the authorities are doing nothing about it because they've been pardoned or whatever other reason, just they can't be bothered to prosecute, they will pinpoint where these people live and will often march, do protests outside the house.
That's right, yeah.
And I've covered some of these where people have marched in large numbers, human rights groups have marched to the house of a known torturer, sat outside the house and basically pointed the finger and they said, well, we can't do anything about your crimes, but we know where you live, we know what you did, and to point out to the neighbours, to everybody else, the guy living in that house there is a former torturer.
And you don't like for people to take justice into their own hands, but you understand it in cases like the human rights situation. And of course, this was reverted under Nestor Kirchner in 2004. Almost all the represores, as they're called, the people involved in those crimes from 76 to 83, were then put into jail. They faced courts, something that they didn't do with people who they arrested, and almost all of them were found guilty. And to this day, many of them are still in jail.
Yeah, and some cases are still going on, aren't they? So
Yes.
it's a long, complicated process. A lot of the perpetrators have left the country. They need to be extradited from Spain, Italy, all over. I mean, one of the most notorious members of the junta was Jorge Videla, and it was quite a sight. I remember just going out of interest to go to Comodoro Pi, one of the main courts in Buenos Aires, and watching part of the court case. And it was a long, laborious process. There was myself, one other member of the press there, and there was his family sitting in the public gallery, press box. There was a bulletproof screen between us and the courtroom, but it was quite a sight to see this formerly, notorious dictator being led into a court by a spotty teenage-looking guard. He was handcuffed. They undid the handcuffs when he got into the court. And I've seen this guy. Obviously, I've lived through the Falkland Malvinas War. Saw it from the UK perspective. This guy was always on our TV screens as the big bad enemy. And then with all the human rights cases that came to light afterwards, and to see him kind of reduced to this rather pathetic figure being led into the courtrooms. And I said the only other people in the public gallery, apart from the one other member of the press, were his family. Were his wife, and I don't know, nephews, nieces, daughters, I'm not sure. They were knitting, they were exchanging coupons, for reduced prices in the supermarket. A few of them waved through the glass at him, but they were there just passing their kind of weekday morning, watching one of the most notorious murderers in Argentine history being tried in a very low-key trial, which is bizarre. It was this kind of, slightly mundane day, the banality of evil sort of thing,
And we have, within this government, the vice president, for example, who has visited Videla when he was prisoner, supports the ex-torturers and killers openly, and this government has indicated that they will pardon speaking of pardons again, they will pardon some of the criminals from the dirty war here, I don't like calling it the dirty war, but it's...
Well, the people say it wasn't really a war, was it? So
That's
it
right.
was very one-sided.
One-sided, yeah. Even though they try to make it so that there were two sides. When Menem did his pardon, he also pardoned, I believe, 5 or 6 Montoneros.
The left-wing guerrillas, yeah.
Right,
so,
who were criminals also. I mean, Mario Firmenich, who was a horrendous criminal, received a pardon. He's been working as an economist in Spain since then. I'm sure he, like most Argentine economists, has been wrong on every economic prediction that he's made. But whatever. Pardons are a big part of what happens here. And what it does is it seeds impunity.
Although one could argue that across Latin America, previous presidents, our own previous president here, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, currently under house arrest, having been prosecuted for corruption, which those in power now believe, those in opposition simply don't believe those charges. So she is a victim of having been president. Brazil, neighbouring Brazil, we had the current president, Lula, was in prison, and then the guy who succeeded him, Jair Bolsonaro, is also now has been prosecuted. So it does seem to be, you prosecute the outgoing or the previous president if you can. So,
well, Bolsonaro also tried to overthrow the country involving his people in a very similar riot to what happened January 6th in the United States, which is very different than the case against Lula, which was based on a beachfront house that Lula claims he never had seen in his life. Also the case against Dilma,
the
who was
predecessor,
president,
Dilma Rousseff,
back in the early part of 2012.
Around then,
time.
So she was impeached. She was removed from office, on very flimsy grounds, on kind of an accounting issue, wasn't it? So, nothing like the torture, the attempted coup, the disrespect of democracy that others have been, accused of. It was an accounting error, if that. And she was ousted from office. And say Lula's beachfront house, which he'd never seen, he says, the evidence there was incredibly flimsy, if at all.
the prosecutor in the case against Lula then became the Minister of Justice under Bolsonaro, which turned out to be a huge scandal also, that he would accept that.
I mean, in Bolivia, you've got former President Evo Morales holed up in his mountain hideout, surrounded by his supporters. They want to arrest him on charges of sex with an underage girl, getting her pregnant, so statutory rape. He obviously denies the charges. And then the guy who succeeded him, the president who succeeded him, Luis Arce, I heard the other day, he was also arrested by the current right-wing government, just taken office in Bolivia. So it does seem to be.
And what about Peru?
Well, what about Peru? Yeah, no, Peru. Before we went on air, we did a list, didn't we? We were talking about former Peruvian presidents from 1985 onwards. Alan Garcia.
That's right. And they've all ended up in jail.
Yeah. So being prosecuted, being tried, it has to be said, they were tried.
Yeah.
Whether they were guilty, whether they were trumped up charges, and usually, it usually comes down to corruption, doesn't it? So while in office, so Alan Garcia,
Toledo,
well, I'm not sure.
Fujimori first,
who resigned, sending a fax from his hotel in Tokyo, I think it was.
That's
where
right.
He was visiting relatives, and he resigned, but he ended up in prison for some time, didn't he? So,
yes.
Ollanta Humala. Again, serving time in prison. Who else have we got?
Kuczynski,
Martin Vizcarra. I mean, you have to do a list, don't you?
Oh, well, Dina
Boluarte, the one before last, who's recently left office. She was ousted, forced to resign from office for permanent moral incapacity. I'm not sure that's a crime, is it? Permanent moral incapacity, which is a lovely charge. So she's out. Whether she'll be prosecuted and end up in jail.
And I think Castillo is also...
Castillo's the one I couldn't read my own writing.
Castillo's
another one. Yeah.
Wanted. I don't know if he's actually been convicted. So if I'm elected president of Peru, I generally speaking will take a change of clothes with me, just in case I'm no longer a civilian.
But is it a good thing, you think, in Peru? Does it show that they have a great judicial system which will hold corrupt presidents to account and send them to jail if guilty? Or is it simply a political move, which they all claim it's a political vendetta, just to kind of castigate the guy or woman who came before you? So it's a hard one in Peru because it's so outrageous, because so many presidents have ended up in jail. But Alan Garcia ended up killing himself, didn't he? Because there were more charges against him.
Well, I think a thing that really tends to show me where those charges go, Kuczynski is a good example. He was involved with some of the same corruption involving a Brazilian company that was doing business in Peru. And I think Toledo was involved in the same...
Well, the big car wash scandal, wasn't it?
Exactly.
So this big building firm that was taking kickbacks to work in Peru,
now,
all over Latin
America.
America.
None of the Brazilians or their Peruvian counterparts, the people who they were involved with in joint ventures, for example, none of them have ever been convicted. They only convict the president on charges that could be called flimsy.
Right.
I don't want to say all the presidents, certainly Fujimori committed tremendous crimes. But some of the other presidents, it just doesn't seem like they have that much in the way of evidence.
Yeah. So no, dangerous job, isn't it, being the president of Peru,
Jesus.
Certainly, president of almost anywhere.
I guess if I ran for president of Peru, I would hope I wouldn't get elected.
Yes, really.
The other thing, you were talking about Baltasar Garzón, the judge in Spain. Boy, we need him right now, as they're taking out boats in the Caribbean, in the Pacific, killing over 90 people in the last couple of months. Where are the international authorities?
Frightened, scared to upset the American authorities. And also, what is Nicolas Maduro, the president, doing right now? Is he planning his escape? Because if they capture him, if they don't shoot him first, if they capture him, he obviously would end up standing trial. Where? In an international court in the United States. Here's another one we've not mentioned, Noriega, Panama. The United States invaded Panama in 1989 simply to remove him from office and try him on drugs charges. And did he die in the U.S. jail? I mean, he
died in a Florida jail.
In a Florida jail, yeah. So again, he got his comeuppance according to the American authorities. I wonder if a similar fate awaits Nicolas Maduro, or does he have some safe haven somewhere? I wouldn't go to Cuba if I was him right now, because Cuba could be the next domino to fall. Russia, perhaps. He has friends in Moscow.
What's crazy about what is going on? They're killing poor fishermen in waters of the Caribbean. They're killing not only Venezuelan but Trinidadian fishermen, Colombian fishermen, over charges of drug smuggling. Now, Maduro has done a lot of horrendous things, but drug smuggling is not among them from everything that I've been reading.
No.
And certainly not fentanyl, and certainly not in those fishing boats that could not even reach, some of them can't even reach some of the Dutch islands.
Well, the fentanyl doesn't even come from it doesn't come from that side of Latin America. It comes from the Mexican side.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to go through Venezuela or Colombia or Panama. It's already far north. It's manufactured in Mexico and crosses the border from there. The cartels there, the Sinaloa, the Michoacan cartels are making those drugs. Yes, possible that cocaine comes through, or certainly comes through out of Colombia, through Venezuela. And again, whether the president is taking his cut from some of those, quite possibly. But that's always the charge levelled at, it was levelled at the Castros when they were in office in Cuba. And again, it was always rumoured when I was in Cuba, there was the Hemingway Marina to the west of Havana, where all the luxury yachts, the boats were stored, mostly for foreigners, but it was always rumoured that the Castros had a very fast boat waiting in a shed there, should they need to make a getaway to avoid being arrested by either the returning Cubans or the US.
In all this is to do what the United States did with Hernandez.
Yeah.
Go to a court, produce your evidence, show what's going on, get your conviction. They did that, and Donald Trump pardons him, saying that he was somebody who the Biden administration was going after. Going after him? Yeah. Give me a break.
Yeah. I mean, they supported him, didn't they? Both, Obama and Biden certainly supported Orlando Hernandez when he was in office, or knew he was a crook, but did nothing. He was their crook. He was the.
And one can say that the Biden Justice Department did convict Hernandez
in the end,
but they convicted him on the evidence.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
Show the evidence with Maduro.
Yeah. We're living in strange times when the justice system either goes completely, after former presidents, or convicts them and lets them go, or doesn't try them at all. So we are living in, we've often lived in a lot of strange times for a long time, but they seem particularly strange now, don't they?
And we'll see if President Trump gets put into jail. Who's going to pardon him?
Good point.
We'll see who does
Elon
that.
Musk, next president of the United States.
Guess so,
will pardon him.
Can't do it. He wasn't born in the U.S.
No, but world leader. He'll be a world leader probably, won't he? He'll be ruling the world by then. Anyway, Joe, great topic of conversation. It's cheered me up.
Well, what are we going to talk? We should talk about something more cheery.
Yeah.
We can always talk food.
Let's talk food, shall we? Yeah, let's talk food next week.
We have a lot of stories about food. We got into them once, but we have a whole nother, or a few other shows to go into that, right?
Okay, well, we're still eating. We need to eat, so we'll talk food next week.
Absolutely.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.